To a statement issued by the Secretariat of the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, the tribunal has found Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe guilty of gross misconduct envisaged in Section 177 of the Constitution. The tribunal compiled its report on the complaint lodged by the justices of the Constitutional Court against Judge President Hlophe. According to a statement, the tribunal has unanimously found that Judge President Hlophe's conduct breached the provision of Section 165 of the Constitution in that he improperly attempted to influence the two justices of the Constitutional Court to violate their oaths of office. It also found that his conduct seriously threatened and interfered with the independence, impartiality, dignity and effectiveness of the Constitutional Court, and Hlophe's conduct threatened public confidence in the judicial system. The tribunal report has been submitted to the chairperson of the Judicial Service Commission. The JSC will in due course consider the report at a meeting. All right, so I want to get some analysis on this. We are still trying to get the legal representatives of Judge President John Hlophe to react to this. But let's speak to legal expert Alton Hart with regards to the developments around this case. Alton, thank you very much indeed for your time. Welcome to the agenda.
Thank you, Blaine, and thank you to the viewers.
All right, so no doubt you've been paying close attention to what has transpired. In terms of what the tribunal had to take into consideration, what were they?
Obviously, if one looks at what the tribunal's work entails, it's normally based on the code of conduct, and the code of conduct is clear as to how judges should behave in courts, in the public eye, and even in their personal lives. So for me, there's a high stake attached to how judges conduct themselves in their ordinary lives, and the code of conduct spells out. And specifically here, I would look at Articles 4, 5, and 7 of the Judicial Services, the Code of Conduct, specifically Articles 4, 5, and 7, that spells out what needs to happen and how a judge should behave so that he or she should not be found guilty of misconduct in how they do business outside or inside a courtroom even.
Right. So it says here the tribunal unanimously concluded that Judge President Hlophe is guilty of gross misconduct envisaged in Section 177 of the Constitution. Help us understand this part of the Constitution.
Obviously, if the Judicial Conduct Tribunal has found, now one needs to know that this tribunal consisted of 3 people that actually came to this conclusion. Now, Judge Hlophe back then also argued that the tribunal should not be the one that's actually considering if his conduct was against the grain of the Constitution and it breaches the Code of Conduct for judicial officers. He was of the view that the whole JSC should actually look at his behavior, because there was an amendment to the Judicial Services Commission Act. So he wanted to play that line, but they would look at the Code of Conduct straight, make a recommendation, and their recommendation is sent to the JSC, which is the Judicial Services Commission. They will then decide if the criteria for impeachment was met. And if they are of the view that the criteria for impeachment was met, then they can now refer the matter to the National Assembly. Because, Blaine, if you remember, all our judges in South Africa is appointed in terms of the Constitution, and their appointment is for life. However, a judge should not think if he has retired, like the case of Judge Mutata, that you cannot be impeached while on retirement, because a judge's appointment is done in terms of the Constitution. But the National Assembly, when they get to the National Assembly now, you need a two-thirds majority to actually impeach a judge. And currently, as we know now, Judge Hlophe has been before the JSC's tribunal for his improper conduct in trying to actually influence former President Jacob Zuma's case. So in the ANC, and we should not be blind to there is still factions in the ANC, one supporting the current president and one supporting the previous president. So it will be very difficult for them to get a two-thirds majority in the National Assembly to actually impeach Judge Hlophe because of the former President Jacob Zuma's faction still existing within the ANC and in the National Assembly.
All right, so quick summation so I understand you properly. So from the tribunal, it goes to the Judicial Services Commission. Thereafter, it goes to the National Assembly, and there you need a two-thirds majority, correct?
That's 100% Blaine. You,
All right.
you summarized it like a lawyer.
I tend to try. With regards to how long a process like that can take, what's the precedent set?
Obviously, if one looks at it now, obviously one needs to look at how long this thing can take. Another maybe 6, 7, 8 months before it gets to the National Assembly. So we shouldn't be thinking, oh, tomorrow it's going to be heard, because the JSC must still deliberate on the issue, feel if the criteria is met, and if so, then they need to go to the portfolio committee. The portfolio committee needs to then go to the chief whips, where they actually get it onto the agenda for the National Assembly. So there's a whole internal process, and this can take, we might even see this thing only being discussed at the end of the year.
So what's the next step in terms of John Hlophe, in terms of a possible appeals process? What sort of recourse does he have?
Obviously, Judge Hlophe, because this is an administrative action, he can take the decision on review. So he has now the courts at his disposal. He can now approach a high court to say, I want to review the decision by the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, because it's only the Conduct Tribunal that found his behavior amounts to misconduct, which warrants impeachment. So the Judicial Services Commission still needs to also come with the same conclusion. And once the Judicial Service Commission, then he takes the Judicial Services Commission's decision now on review, saying, I want this decision to be reviewed by a court of law. And thereafter, he will now know. Obviously, if the High Court says there's no grounds for review, he can go to the SCA. And if the SCA said no grounds for review, he can go to the Constitutional Court, because obviously this has some constitutional bearing on how Judge Hlophe's future sees out from this.
As I said at the top of the interview, we are trying to reach out to Judge Hlophe's legal representatives to get their take and their reaction to these latest developments. But in terms of precedents, Alton, from your knowledge, have we seen similar findings before?
Yes, obviously, we've seen similar findings before, that a judge conduct was found to border on where he can be impeached. But obviously, if you get to the National Assembly, because a judge is appointed in terms of the Constitution, and the National Assembly say, listen, yeah, we're not going to vote for impeachment, they can give them like sort of punitive actions, but it's of much lesser extent. It's like they must make a public apology. So it's like really your punitive actions. Sometimes it's like it's a reprimand or counseling or training for judges to go. But I mean, like in the case of Judge Mutata, he was found now like his conduct was found to be like gross misconduct, and he was like sort of he's already on retirement. So what can you do to this guy? So I think there should be tougher penalties on judges, but obviously, if you don't get the weight in the National Assembly, then technically we are a little bit with our hands tied. So years now where we're facing, and obviously I suspect this is what's going to happen with Judge Hlophe also if this thing goes to the National Assembly.
Alton, as always, we do appreciate your better mind in helping us understand this process. No doubt we will continue to follow up on this story. It is indeed a developing story. Alton Hart from the University of Johannesburg Law Clinic. Thank you as always. Good health to you and your family.
Thank you, Blaine.
All right, there you go.